I'm Natasha, your host. Today's episode is specially designed to improve your English listening and writing skills by sharing real-life stories and examples. Listening closely to natural conversations will help you understand different accents, vocabulary, and expressions. When you listen carefully, your brain learns how to connect sounds to meaning, which also helps you write better sentences. If you enjoy this episode, please press the like button to support our community. Before we start, let me ask you, have you ever had a moment when you misunderstood someone because of how they spoke? Or maybe you heard a story and wanted to remember every detail, but it was difficult. How do you usually practice your English listening? Think about these questions as we go through the stories today. Let me tell you about a friend of mine, Daniel. Daniel recently moved to a new city for work. On his first day, he went to a coffee shop and tried to order in English. The barista spoke quickly, and Daniel didn't catch everything. Instead of feeling frustrated, Daniel listened carefully to the sounds and words he understood. He wrote down what he heard and practiced the pronunciation at home. After a few days, he was much more confident speaking and writing about his experience. Daniel's story shows that even short conversations can be great practice for listening and writing. Now, I want you to imagine a family weekend story. Sarah and her husband decided to visit a small village nearby. The village was famous for its beautiful gardens and fresh food markets. When they arrived, Sarah listened to the vendor explaining the different vegetables and how to cook them. She repeated the words quietly to herself and later wrote a short description of the visit. Listening to real people sharing their daily lives helped Sarah remember new words and use them in her writing. Have you ever tried to follow a recipe in English? John, one of our listeners, shared that he uses cooking videos to practice listening. He watches carefully as the chef explains each step, then pauses to write down ingredients and instructions. This method not only improves his listening, but also helps him write clear instructions. What about you? Do you use videos or stories to practice listening? Here is another story from Lisa. She had to explain a problem at her workplace to her manager. The manager spoke politely, but used some expressions Lisa didn't know. Lisa listened carefully to the tone and tried to understand the meaning from the context. Later, she looked up the expressions and practiced writing emails using them. Listening to real conversations in different situations can build your vocabulary and improve your writing style. As you listen to these stories, try to focus on how the speakers use words and phrases in natural ways. Pay attention to the details and, if possible, write down new words or ideas. Practicing this habit every day will strengthen your English skills. Now, here is a quick question for you. What story or topic do you find most interesting to listen to in English? Do you like daily life stories, work conversations, or travel experiences? Think about this because choosing topics you enjoy will make listening practice more fun and effective. Remember, the English Pod community uploads new videos every day to help you improve your English. Stay with us and keep practicing. Your listening and writing skills will grow step by step. Let's move on to a story about an unexpected event. Michael's car broke down on a busy street. He called his wife for help and described the situation clearly to the mechanic. Listening carefully to the mechanic's advice, Michael repeated the important points to make sure he understood. This real conversation helped Michael practice how to listen for important information and respond accurately. When you listen to such practical stories, it helps your brain get used to real English situations. I want you to try this exercise now. Think of a recent experience you had. Imagine explaining it to a friend in English. What words would you use? How would you describe the details? Practice listening by reading your story aloud or recording it. Later, write down your story and check for new words or phrases you can add. Thank you for listening to this episode. Keep practicing your English by listening and writing every day. Remember to press the like button if you find this helpful. The English Pod community is here to support you on your English journey. Now, I want to share a story about Emma and her experience at the supermarket. One afternoon, Emma went to buy groceries. While she was in the store, she heard an announcement about a special sale. The speaker's voice was clear but a little fast. Emma listened carefully and understood that the sale was on fruits and vegetables. She wrote down the names of the items on sale and planned her shopping. This simple story shows how listening in everyday places can help you catch important information. When you hear announcements or conversations, try to focus on the main ideas and write notes if you can. Here is another story from James. He needed to explain a problem with his internet connection to a customer service representative. The representative asked several questions to understand the issue. James listened to each question, repeated it in his own words, and then gave answers. This way, he made sure they both understood each other clearly. After the call, James wrote down new words he heard and practiced using them in sentences. This example teaches us that active listening, paying close attention and repeating what you hear, can improve communication and help you learn new vocabulary. Think about your own daily routine. What kind of conversations do you hear? Are they at work, at the store, or at home? Try to listen carefully to these conversations, even if you don't understand everything. Focus on key words and the main message. You can also write a short summary after listening. This habit will help you connect listening and writing skills naturally. Let me tell you about Anna. She enjoys visiting local markets during her trips. One day, she met a farmer who explained how he grows vegetables without chemicals. Anna listened to his story and asked questions to learn more. Afterward, she wrote a small paragraph about what she learned. Listening to real stories like this helps you understand English better and gives you ideas for writing. Here is a question for you. When you listen to English, do you try to guess the meaning of unknown words from the situation? Guessing the meaning from context is a very useful skill. It helps you understand new words without stopping the conversation or reading. Practice this by listening to short stories or news and trying to understand the general idea, even if some words are new. Now let's talk about a simple but useful exercise. When you listen to a story or conversation, try to write down 3 new words or phrases. Then check their meaning and practice saying them aloud. Using new words in your speaking and writing will make your English stronger. Here is a story about Robert and his visit to the bank. He had to explain why he needed a loan. The bank officer asked questions in a polite and formal way. Robert listened carefully and answered clearly. After the meeting, he wrote down useful phrases he heard. This practice helped him feel more confident when speaking English in formal situations. Try to remember this. Listening is not only about hearing words. It is about understanding meaning, tone, and intention. When you listen with attention, your brain works like a detective searching for clues in the conversation. This makes your English learning more effective. Finally, here is a quick activity. Listen to a short story or conversation. Then write down the main idea in 1 or 2 sentences. This helps improve both your listening and writing skills at the same time. Let's keep going with one more story. Julia was planning a small party at her house. She called her husband to tell him about the guests and food she wanted to prepare. Julia listened carefully to his suggestions and repeated them, to be sure she understood. This simple dialogue shows how listening carefully helps in daily communication and improves your English. Let me tell you a longer story about Mark and his experience at the post office. One morning, Mark needed to send a package to his sister who lives in another city. He went to the post office early to avoid a long wait. When he arrived, he listened carefully as the clerk explained the different shipping options. The clerk spoke clearly but used some words Mark did not know, like priority, standard, and tracking number. Mark focused on the words he recognized and tried to understand the meaning from the conversation. Mark asked the clerk to explain priority shipping again. The clerk said it means the package arrives faster than regular shipping. Mark repeated the word priority several times to remember it. He also wrote down the word in his notebook so he could practice later. Then the clerk talked about the tracking number, which is a code that helps you follow your package online. Mark listened carefully and made sure he understood how to use the tracking number. He asked a few questions to be sure. After sending the package, Mark went home and wrote a short message to his sister, explaining how he sent the package and what shipping option he chose. Writing this message helped Mark remember the new words and practice writing English clearly. This story shows how everyday tasks like sending a package can be useful for practicing listening and writing. When you listen to real conversations and write about them, you learn practical language that you will use in your daily life. Now think about a time when you had to explain something to someone in English. Maybe you told a friend about your day or described a problem you had. Did you listen carefully to the other person's questions? Did you try to repeat what they said to make sure you understood? This is an important skill in English. When you listen and repeat, it helps your brain remember new words and improves your speaking and writing. Let me share another example. Sophie works in an office where she often talks on the phone with customers. One day, a customer called and asked about a product. The customer spoke quickly, and Sophie did not understand all the words at first. But Sophie stayed calm. She listened for the main ideas and wrote down important information. Then she repeated the customer's questions to check she understood correctly. This helped Sophie answer clearly and politely. Later, Sophie wrote an email to summarize the phone call. This helped her practice writing with the new vocabulary she heard. When you listen to English in your daily life, try to do the same. Write down new words or sentences. Repeat what you hear in your mind or out loud. Then try to use these words in your writing or speaking. This is a simple but powerful way to improve your English. Now let me tell you a story about Tom and his visit to the doctor. Tom was not feeling well and needed to explain his symptoms. The doctor asked many questions like, when did the pain start? And how often does it happen? Tom listened carefully and answered honestly. Sometimes the doctor used words Tom did not understand. Tom asked the doctor to explain or repeat the words slowly. After the appointment, Tom wrote down the words he learned and practiced them at home. This helped Tom feel more confident when talking to the doctor again. Listening in situations like this is very important because you need to understand questions and instructions. If you do not understand something, it is okay to ask the person to repeat or explain. This will help you learn faster and avoid mistakes. Here is a good exercise for you. Listen to a short conversation or story in English. After that, try to write a few sentences about what you heard. Don't worry if you make mistakes. The important thing is to practice. Writing will help you remember new words and improve your sentence structure. Let's talk about a different story now. Laura wanted to learn how to cook a new recipe. She found a cooking video online where the chef explained each step slowly and clearly. Laura listened carefully and paused the video when needed. She wrote down the ingredients and the cooking steps in English. Then she followed the recipe and cooked the dish. After cooking, Laura wrote a small review about how the recipe went. This helped her practice both listening and writing in a fun way. Listening to real instructions or stories about daily activities like cooking, shopping, or traveling is very useful. These stories use common words and phrases that you will hear often. When you practice listening and writing about these topics, your English will improve naturally. Here is a question for you. What kind of stories do you enjoy most? Do you like stories about daily life, work, travel, or family? When you listen to topics you like, it becomes easier and more fun to practice. Try to choose stories that interest you and listen to them regularly. Finally, let me share one more example. James wanted to improve his English for work. He listened to many short stories about business situations, like meetings and phone calls. James practiced by writing short summaries of each story. He also repeated new words and expressions aloud to remember them better. This helped James feel more confident speaking and writing English at work. Remember, improving your English takes time and practice every day. Try to listen carefully, write often, and use new words in your daily conversations. This will help you become better step by step. Let me tell you a story about David and how he learned to manage his time better. David works in an office and often feels very busy. One day, his manager asked him to finish a report by the end of the day. David was worried because he had many tasks to do. He listened carefully to the manager's instructions and took notes. The manager said it was important to focus on the most important points in the report. David asked questions to be sure he understood everything. After the meeting, David made a list of tasks. He decided to start with the easiest tasks and then work on the harder parts of the report. During the day, David listened to some advice from his coworkers about how to avoid distractions. One coworker said it helps to turn off phone notifications and set small goals for each hour. David tried this and found it easier to concentrate. At the end of the day, he finished the report on time and felt proud of his work. Afterward, David wrote a short note about what he learned about time management. This story shows how listening carefully to instructions and advice can help you work better. Writing about what you learn also helps you remember new ideas and words. Now think about a time when you had to follow instructions in English. Maybe at work, school, or home. How did you listen to the instructions? Did you write notes or ask questions if something was not clear? These skills are very important for learning English and for real-life situations. Listening carefully and writing what you hear helps you understand better and remember more. Let me tell you another story about Sarah. Sarah wanted to improve her English for her job in customer service. She listened to many conversations between customers and staff. At first, she found it difficult because people spoke quickly, but Sarah did not give up. She practiced listening every day by watching simple English videos and reading along with the subtitles. She also wrote down new phrases and practiced using them with her friends. One day, Sarah had a call with a customer who spoke clearly and slowly. She listened carefully and answered politely. The customer thanked her for good service. Sarah felt happy and confident. This story shows how regular practice and writing help improve listening and speaking skills. Let me tell you a story about Lucy and her first day at a new job. Lucy listened to her manager explain the tasks and the schedule. The manager spoke clearly, but used some new words. Lucy wrote down the important words and asked for help with the meaning. She repeated the instructions to make sure she understood. During the day, Lucy listened to her coworkers and learned new expressions. At the end of the day, Lucy wrote a summary of what she did. This helped her remember the new words and feel ready for the next day. Think about your work or school. Listening carefully and writing notes can help you learn faster and feel more confident. Now let me share a story about Tom and his visit to the post office. Tom needed to send a package to his sister. The clerk explained the different shipping options and prices. Tom listened carefully and asked questions to understand. He wrote down the words priority, standard, and tracking number. The clerk showed Tom how to use the tracking number online. After the visit, Tom wrote an email to his sister to explain how he sent the package and what the tracking number was for. This helped Tom practice writing and remember new vocabulary. Listening and writing in real situations like this help you learn practical English. Let me tell you about Sophie. Sophie likes cooking. She found an easy recipe online with a video. The chef explained each step slowly. Sophie listened and paused the video to write down the ingredients and steps. Then she cooked the dish. After cooking, Sophie wrote a review about how the recipe went. This helped her practice listening, writing, and speaking English. Listening to instructions and stories about everyday activities is very useful. Try to practice with topics you enjoy. Finally, let me share a story about Michael. Michael wants to improve his English for meetings at work. He listens to podcasts about business English. He writes new words and practices using them. Michael also speaks with his coworkers to practice. This helps him feel more confident at work. Remember, listening and writing every day will help you improve. Choose stories and topics that interest you and keep practicing. Let me tell you about Sarah and her new hobby. Sarah decided to start jogging every morning to stay healthy. She listened to advice from her doctor about how to start slowly and avoid injury. Sarah wrote down the doctor's instructions to help her remember. She also listened to a podcast about jogging tips. Every morning, Sarah followed the advice carefully. She kept a small notebook where she wrote how far she ran each day and how she felt. After a few weeks, Sarah saw improvement in her health. She felt stronger and happier. This story shows how listening to advice, writing notes, and practicing regularly can help you learn new skills and improve your English. Now think about your own health or hobbies. Maybe you want to learn how to cook better or start exercising. Listening to experts and writing important points can help you succeed. You do not have to understand everything at once. Just try your best and practice every day. Let me share a story about David. David wanted to learn how to use a new computer program for his job. He watched online videos where the teacher explained the steps slowly. David listened carefully and paused the videos to write down the instructions. When David tried the program himself, he used his notes to remember the steps. Sometimes he made mistakes, but he kept trying. After a few days, David could use the program well. This shows that listening and writing notes help you learn difficult things. It is okay to make mistakes. Practice is very important. Think about when you learn English. You can listen to podcasts, watch videos, or attend classes. Writing new words and sentences will help you remember them. Do not worry if it is hard at first. Keep practicing. Let me tell you a story about Emily and her trip to the bank. Emily needed to open a new account. She listened carefully to the bank worker who explained the documents she needed. Emily wrote down the list of documents and the steps to open the account. She also listened to instructions about how to use online banking. After her visit, Emily checked her notes and felt ready to manage her new account. This story shows how listening carefully and writing important information help you in everyday life. When you go to places like the bank, post office, or hospital, listen carefully and take notes if you can. This will help you understand better and avoid mistakes. Let me share a story about John and his experience with learning English grammar. John found it hard to remember all the grammar rules. He listened to a teacher explaining one rule at a time. After each lesson, John wrote simple sentences using the new grammar. He read his sentences out loud to practice speaking. John also listened to English radio to hear how native speakers use grammar naturally. He wrote down interesting sentences and tried to use them later. Over time, John's grammar improved. This shows how listening, writing, and speaking together help you learn better. Think about your own English learning. Try to write sentences using new words and grammar. Listen to English often. Repeat and practice what you learn. Now I want to tell you a story about Claire and her visit to the post office. Claire had to send a package to her sister in another city. She listened carefully as the clerk explained the different shipping options. Claire wrote down the prices and delivery times. She asked questions when she did not understand. After sending the package, Claire checked her notes and learned new words like express, standard, and tracking number. This helped her feel more confident for next time. Listening and writing in real-life situations is very helpful. It prepares you for future tasks and builds your vocabulary. Let me tell you about Mark and his experience learning to cook. Mark watched a cooking show in English. He listened to the chef explaining how to prepare a simple meal. Mark wrote down the ingredients and the steps. He followed the recipe and cooked the meal. Then Mark wrote a short paragraph about how the meal tasted and what he learned. This helped him practice reading, listening, and writing skills. Try to find simple English videos or articles about things you like. Listen carefully and write notes. Then practice using new words. Now I want to share a story about Anna and her first day at a new job. Anna listened carefully to her manager explaining her tasks. She wrote down the important information. Anna also listened to her coworkers talking and asked questions to understand better. At the end of the day, Anna wrote a summary about her work. This helped her remember what she learned and use new words. Anna felt more confident the next day. Listening and writing help you do better in work and school. Take notes when you can and practice new words. Let me tell you about Paul and his visit to the doctor. Paul explained his symptoms and listened to the doctor's advice. The doctor used some difficult words. Paul asked the doctor to explain slowly. After the visit, Paul wrote down the new words and practiced them with his wife. This made him feel more confident for future visits. Listening carefully and asking questions is very important, especially in serious situations. Let me share a story about Lisa and her experience buying a new phone. Lisa listened carefully to the salesperson explaining the features. She wrote down the names of the features she liked. Lisa asked the salesperson to explain some words. After buying the phone, Lisa used her notes to learn more about how to use it. This helped her learn new English words and use the phone better. Listening and writing about things you need helps you learn practical English. Let me tell you about Jack and his practice with English listening. Jack listens to short English news every day. He writes down new words and tries to use them in sentences. He also listens to English podcasts about different topics. Jack repeats words and sentences to improve his pronunciation. This practice helps him speak and understand better. Try to listen to short English news or podcasts every day. Write down new words and practice speaking them. Let me tell you about Grace and her daily English routine. Grace listens to English radio while cooking. She writes down interesting phrases. Grace also reads simple English books and writes summaries. She practices speaking by telling stories to her husband. This helps Grace. Think about your own learning. How often do you listen to English every day? Even 10 minutes of practice can help. Try to listen to different types of English, such as conversations, announcements, or stories. Write new words or sentences you hear and use them in your own sentences. This will help you improve both listening and writing. Let me share a story about Michael and his visit to the bank. Michael needed to open a new account. The bank officer explained the steps and asked many questions. Michael listened carefully and answered clearly. The officer used some new words like deposit, withdraw, and balance. Michael wrote these words in his notebook and looked up their meanings later. After the visit, Michael wrote a short email to thank the bank officer and to confirm the information. This helped him practice writing formal English. This story shows how listening and writing go together in real-life situations. Here is a simple exercise you can try. Listen to a short conversation or story in English. Then, write down the main ideas in your own words. Try to include new words or phrases you learned. This exercise will help you remember the words better and improve your writing. Now, I want to tell you about Emma. Emma enjoys traveling and meeting new people. During her trips, she listens to local stories and learns about different cultures. One time, Emma visited a small village where a local farmer told her about his work. Emma listened carefully and asked many questions. She wrote down new words and phrases. Later, Emma shared the story with her friends in English. This helped her practice both listening and speaking. This story shows how listening to real stories can help you learn English in a fun way. Think about your daily life. Where do you hear English? At work, at school, or on the street? Try to listen carefully and notice new words. Write them down and practice using them. This will help your English improve naturally. Let me share a story about John. John had to give a short presentation at work. He listened to advice from his manager about speaking clearly and slowly. John practiced listening to sample presentations online and wrote down useful phrases. On the day of his presentation, John listened carefully to questions from his coworkers and answered them politely. After the presentation, John wrote a summary of what he said and the questions asked. This helped him prepare for future presentations. This story shows how listening and writing are important for speaking confidently. Try to make a habit of listening and writing every day. Listen to a short story, conversation, or news. Write down new words and sentences. Use these words in your writing or speaking. This practice will help you learn faster. Here is a question for you. What is the most difficult part of listening in English for you? Is it new words, fast speech, or understanding the meaning? When you know your difficulties, you can work on them better. Try to listen to simple English first and then move to more difficult topics. Let me tell you about Lucy and her experience at a restaurant. Lucy wanted to order food in English. The waiter explained the menu and answered her questions. Lucy listened carefully and repeated the dish names to be sure she understood. After the meal, Lucy wrote a small review about the restaurant and the food. This helped her practice writing and remember useful words. Listening in everyday situations, like ordering food, shopping, or asking for directions, is very important. These experiences give you practical English skills. When you listen and write about these situations, you improve your English step by step. Finally, let me share a story about Daniel. Daniel wanted to learn new words about health and fitness. He listened to podcasts about exercise and healthy eating. Daniel wrote down new words and used them in sentences. He also talked to his wife about what he learned. This helped Daniel remember new vocabulary and practice speaking. Listening to topics you like will make learning easier and more enjoyable. Remember, practice is the key to success. Listen every day, write often, and speak whenever you can. This will help you improve your English naturally. Let me tell you a story about Peter and how he learned to take care of his garden. Peter has a small garden behind his house. One spring, he wanted to plant some flowers and vegetables. He listened to a garden expert on the radio. The expert talked about how to prepare the soil, how much water plants need, and the best time to plant seeds. Peter listened carefully and wrote down the important steps. Then Peter went outside and followed the instructions one by one. He watered the plants every day and pulled out the weeds. After a few weeks, the plants started to grow well. Peter felt happy and proud. This story shows how listening to advice and writing notes can help you learn new skills in English and in life. Now think about a time when you tried to learn something new. Maybe you listened to someone explaining it or read instructions. How? Did you remember the information? Did you write notes or repeat the steps? Writing and listening together help you understand better and remember longer. This is true for learning English too. Let me share another story about Anna. Anna wanted to improve her English to help her at work. She works in a small shop and talks to many customers every day. Some customers speak quickly or use new words. Anna listens carefully and sometimes asks customers to repeat or explain. After work, Anna writes a short diary about her day. She uses new words she heard. This helps her practice writing and learn new vocabulary. One day, a customer asked Anna about a product she did not know. Anna listened carefully and said she would find out the answer. She asked her manager and learned the information. Anna told the customer clearly. This shows how listening, asking questions, and writing can help you communicate better. Now think about your daily life. How often do you speak or listen in English? It is okay if you do not understand everything at first. Keep listening and writing. This will help you improve step by step. Let me tell you a story about James and his trip to the library. James wanted to borrow some books to practice English. He listened to the librarian explain how to get a library card and the rules for borrowing books. James wrote down the important information and asked questions to make sure he understood. He borrowed some books with simple English stories. James read the books and wrote summaries about each story. This helped him improve his reading, writing, and listening at the same time. Think about your own learning. Do you like to read books or listen to stories? Combining reading, listening, and writing is a good way to improve your English. Try to find books or stories that interest you. Let me share a story about Emma and her visit to the supermarket. Emma needed to buy food for dinner. She listened carefully to the cashier's questions about payment. Emma also listened to the announcements about store offers. She asked the cashier to repeat some words she did not understand. After shopping, Emma wrote a shopping list in English to prepare for her next trip. Writing the list helped her remember food names and practice spelling. When you go shopping or do other daily activities, listen carefully to the words people use. Write down new words or phrases and practice them later. This will help you learn practical English. Now I want to tell you about Robert and his experience with a doctor's appointment. Robert had a checkup and needed to explain his symptoms. The doctor asked many questions about how Robert felt. Robert listened carefully and answered honestly. The doctor used some medical words Robert did not know. Robert asked the doctor to explain those words slowly. After the appointment, Robert wrote down the new words and their meanings. He practiced saying the words with his wife. This helped Robert feel more confident in future visits. Listening carefully in situations like this is very important. If you do not understand something, it is okay to ask questions. This will help you learn faster and communicate better. Here is a useful exercise for you. Listen to a short story or conversation. Write down the main points in your own words. Try to use new words you heard. This practice will help you improve both listening and writing skills. Let me tell you about Henry. Henry wanted to learn how to use public transportation in his new city. At first, he felt confused because the bus routes and schedules were new to him. He decided to listen carefully to the announcements at the bus stop. Henry also asked the bus driver simple questions like where the bus would stop. He took notes in a small notebook every day. He wrote the bus numbers, the stops, and the times. Henry practiced reading his notes before he left the house each morning. After a week, Henry felt much more confident. He could take the bus without fear. This story shows how listening carefully and writing notes can help you in real life. It helps you understand better and remember important information. Now think about yourself. When you need to use something new like a bus, a bank, or a store, try to listen carefully. Ask questions if you do not understand. Write down important words or numbers. It will make things easier for you. Let me share a story about Emma. Emma wanted to improve her English speaking skills. She started by listening to simple conversations on podcasts. After each conversation, Emma paused and wrote down new words and sentences. Then she practiced saying those sentences out loud. Emma also recorded herself speaking and listened to the recordings. This helped her notice mistakes and improve her pronunciation. She kept a journal where she wrote about her day in English. Every week, Emma read her journal to her husband. This helped her practice speaking and get feedback. Emma's listening, writing, and speaking practice helped her feel more confident in English. Think about your own English practice. Try to listen to short stories or conversations. Write down new words and practice saying them. Speak to yourself or someone you trust in English. It will help you improve faster. Let me tell you about Michael and his visit to the supermarket. Michael needed to buy groceries for his family. He listened carefully to the shop assistant when asking where to find certain products. Michael wrote a shopping list before he went to the store. At the supermarket, he checked off each item as he found it. Michael also listened to other customers talking and learned new words. After shopping, he wrote down the new words and phrases he heard. This helped him remember and use them later. When you go to a supermarket or any public place, listen to people around you. Write down new words or phrases. Practice using them when you can. Let me share a story about Anna and her first cooking lesson. Anna signed up for a cooking class in English. The teacher explained the recipe step by step. Anna listened carefully and wrote down the ingredients and instructions. When Anna cooked at home, she read her notes to remember the steps. She also listened to English cooking videos and wrote down new words. Anna found this method helpful to learn cooking and improve her English at the same time. You can learn English by listening and writing about your hobbies or daily tasks. This will make learning fun and useful. Let me tell you about James and his experience learning how to fix a bicycle. James watched online tutorials in English. He listened to each step and paused to write down instructions. When James started fixing his bike, he followed his notes carefully. He also asked his friend to explain words he did not understand. James practiced using new words like wrench, chain, and pedal. After practicing many times, James could fix his bike without help. This story shows how listening and writing help you learn new skills and English at the same time. Think about your own interests. Try to find videos or podcasts in English about those topics. Listen carefully, write notes, and practice. Let me share a story about Olivia and her visit to the library. Olivia needed to find books for her school project. She listened carefully to the librarian's advice on how to use the library catalog. Olivia wrote down the steps and some new words like reference, catalog, and due date. She practiced using the library computer by following her notes. Olivia also listened to English audiobooks and wrote summaries. This helped her improve her English and do well in school. When you use a new place or service, listen carefully. Write down important words and steps. Practice using the new words and information. Let me tell you about Daniel and his daily English practice. Daniel listens to English news in the morning. He writes down the headlines and new words. Daniel tries to use these words and sentences during the day. He also listens to English podcasts about everyday life. Daniel repeats what he hears to improve his pronunciation. He keeps a notebook where he writes new phrases and practices them regularly. This routine helps Daniel improve his listening, speaking, and writing skills. Try to create a daily English routine like Daniel's. Listen, write, and speak every day. It will help you improve steadily. Let me share a story about Lucy and her experience learning English at work. Lucy works in an office where people speak English. She listens carefully during meetings and takes notes. Lucy writes down new vocabulary and expressions. She practices using these new words in emails and conversations. Lucy also asks her coworkers to correct her when she makes mistakes. Over time, Lucy's English at work improved. She felt more confident talking to her boss and clients. When you work or study, listen carefully and write down useful words and phrases. Practice using them in real situations. Let me tell you about Peter and his practice with English listening. Peter listens to short English stories every day. He writes down new words and tries to understand the meaning. Peter reads his notes and practices speaking the sentences aloud. He also listens to conversations between native speakers. Peter tries to repeat the pronunciation and intonation. This practice helps Peter improve his listening and speaking skills. Try listening to short stories or conversations every day. Write down new words and practice speaking. Let me share a story about Anna and her visit to the post office. Anna needed to send a package to her family. She listened carefully to the worker's instructions about the forms and prices. Anna wrote down the steps and new words like express and tracking. After sending the package, Anna practiced using these words with her husband. This helped her feel ready for future trips to the post office. When you go to places like the post office or bank, listen carefully and write important information. It will help you understand and use English better. Let me tell you about Tom and his experience learning how to use a smartphone. Tom listened to a teacher explaining the phone's features. He wrote down the names of apps and buttons. Tom practiced using the phone by following his notes. He also listened to podcasts about technology and wrote down new words. Tom's practice helped him learn English and use his phone confidently. Try to find English lessons about technology or daily tasks. Listen carefully, write notes, and practice. Let me share a story about Emma and her daily English learning. Emma listens to English radio in the morning. She writes down new words and phrases. Emma reads simple English books and writes summaries. She talks to her husband in English to practice speaking. This routine helps Emma improve her listening, writing, and speaking skills every day. Try to listen, write, and speak English every day. It will help you improve your skills. Let me tell you about John and his experience learning English grammar. John listens to lessons and writes example sentences. He reads his sentences out loud and practices speaking. John also listens to English radio to hear natural grammar use. He writes down interesting sentences and tries to use them. This helps John improve his grammar and speaking. Try to write sentences using new grammar rules. Listen and speak often. To practice. Let me share a story about Sarah and her hobby of gardening. Sarah listens to English podcasts about gardening. She writes down new words and phrases. Sarah reads gardening books and writes notes. She talks to her husband about her garden in English. This helps Sarah learn English and enjoy her hobby. Try to learn English by listening and writing about your interests. Let me tell you about Michael and his trip to the supermarket. Michael listens carefully to shop assistants and other customers. He writes down new words and phrases. Michael checks his notes and practices using new words. This helps him learn practical English for everyday life. When you go shopping, listen carefully and write down useful words. Let me share a story about Anna and her visit to the doctor. Anna listens carefully to the doctor's advice. She asks questions to understand better. Anna writes down important words and practices them. This helps her feel confident and prepared. Listening and writing help in important situations. Let me tell you about David and his practice with English listening. David listens to news and podcasts every day. He writes down new words and phrases. David practices speaking and reading his notes. This routine helps him improve his English skills. Try to listen and write every day. Let me share a story about Lisa and her learning experience. Lisa listens to English lessons and writes notes. This one is about Rachel, a nurse who works at a hospital in a small town. One evening, she was walking home after a long shift. On her way, she saw an elderly man standing near a bus stop, looking confused. She walked up to him and asked if he needed help. The man, Mr. Thomas, explained that he got off at the wrong stop and didn't know how to get back home. Rachel smiled and offered to call a taxi for him. She stayed with him until the car arrived and even gave him a bottle of water. Mr. Thomas was so thankful and said he would never forget her kindness. This story shows how a small act of kindness can make someone's day better. Have you ever helped a stranger before? How did it feel? Try writing a short paragraph about your experience. Now let's hear about Ben, who works in construction. One day, there was a misunderstanding on the work site. One of his co-workers thought Ben had taken his tools by mistake. The co-worker, Mr. Carter, started raising his voice. Instead of getting angry, Ben stayed calm and said, "Let's check together. Maybe there's been a mix-up." They looked around and soon found the tools under a pile of boards. Mr. Carter apologized and they both laughed. From that day, they respected each other even more. This story teaches us that staying respectful in difficult moments can build stronger relationships. Have you ever stayed calm when someone misunderstood you? Try to write a few lines about that situation. Next is a story from Laura, a mother of 2 young boys. One afternoon, she was preparing lunch when her younger son, Daniel, started crying. He had dropped his favorite toy in the kitchen sink full of soapy water. Laura could have gotten upset, but instead she used it as a learning moment. She showed Daniel how to safely empty the sink and find the toy. Later, Daniel said, "Thank you, Mom, for not getting mad." Laura smiled and realized that patience teaches more than punishment. Think about a time when someone was patient with you. What did you learn from that moment? Write it down as part of your practice. Now here's a story from Michael, who works in customer service. One day, he received a call from a man named Mr. Evans, who was upset because his order hadn't arrived on time. Michael listened carefully, didn't interrupt, and then explained the reason for the delay. He also offered a small discount as an apology. Mr. Evans was still disappointed but said, "Thank you for being honest and respectful. I appreciate that." Later that day, Michael told his team that good communication is the best tool in customer service. Listening carefully and speaking kindly can solve many problems. Do you remember a time when someone solved a problem for you just by listening? Write a few sentences about it. Let's keep going with another real example. Emily is a school teacher who started working at a new school last year. In her first week, she felt nervous because everything was new. She didn't know many people and had trouble finding her way around the school. One day, a teacher named Mr. Harris invited her to have lunch with the staff in the teacher's room. That small invitation helped her feel welcome. She slowly made friends and became more confident in her new job. Think about your first week in a new place. How did you feel? What helped you feel better? Try to describe it using simple sentences. Thank you for your message and for following, along with these English stories. It makes me happy to know that you are learning with me. I will now continue and share longer stories that use clear, simple English. These stories will help you learn how to speak and understand English in real-life situations. You will hear how people talk in daily life, using easy words and polite phrases. Do not worry if you do not understand everything at first. Just keep listening and learning. I will now share another set of helpful stories and conversations with English names and plain sentences. Let me tell you a story about a man named Daniel. Daniel works in a small repair shop. He fixes phones, watches, and small electronics. His shop is close to the bus station, so many people come to him when something is broken. One day, a woman named Helen walked into his shop. She looked worried and held her phone in her hand. Daniel looked up and said, "Good morning, how can I help you?" Helen said, "Good morning. My phone is not working. It will not turn on." Daniel took the phone and looked at it carefully. He said, "Let me check the battery. Sometimes it is just a small problem." Helen watched as Daniel opened the back of the phone and tested the battery. After a few minutes, he said, "The battery is fine. I think the power button is broken. I can fix it, but it will take 1 hour." Helen said, "That is okay. I will come back later." Daniel said, "No problem. I will have it ready in 1 hour." Helen left the shop and came back after some time. Daniel smiled and said, "Your phone is fixed now. It turns on properly. I also cleaned the screen for you." Helen said, "Thank you so much. I was worried I would lose all my photos." Daniel said, "Everything is still there. I did not delete anything." Helen said, "You are very kind. I will tell my friends about your shop." Daniel said, "Thank you. I am happy to help." This story shows how to talk clearly when you need help with something that is broken. Daniel used simple and polite words like, "Let me check the battery," and "I can fix it." You can also use these phrases when you want to ask someone for help or when you are helping another person. Being polite and clear helps people understand each other better. Now let me tell you a story about a young man named Ryan. Ryan is a student at a college. He studies accounting and works part-time at a bookstore in the city. One afternoon, a man named Mr. Roberts came into the store. He was looking for a book about saving money. Ryan walked over to him and said, "Hello, sir. Can I help you find something?" Mr. Roberts said, "Yes, I am looking for a book about personal finance. I want to learn how to save and plan my budget." Ryan said, "We have a few books like that. Please follow me." He took Mr. Roberts to a shelf with finance books. Ryan picked up one and said, "This book is called Smart Money Choices. It is easy to read and has good tips." Mr. Roberts took the book and looked at the back cover. He said, "This looks good. I will take it." Ryan smiled and said, "If you need more help, just let me know." Mr. Roberts said, "Thank you. You have been very helpful." Ryan said, You are welcome. I hope you enjoy the book. This short talk shows how to help someone in a store. Ryan used clear and friendly words like, "Please follow me," and "This book is easy to read." These words help people feel comfortable and make the conversation smooth. Now I want to tell you about a woman named Susan. Susan works at a local clinic. She is a receptionist. She talks to patients when they arrive and helps them sign in. One day, a man named George came to the clinic. He looked a little tired and sat down near the front desk. Susan looked up and said, "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" George said, "Yes, I have an appointment today at 3 o'clock. Susan said, "What is your full name?" George said, "George Martin." Susan looked at the list and said, "Yes, I see your name here. Please wait in the seating area. The doctor will see you soon." George said, "Thank you." After some time, Susan called out, "Mr. Martin, the doctor is ready to see you." George stood up and said, "Thank you for your help." Susan said, "You are welcome. The room is the first door on the right." George smiled and walked in. This kind of talk is common in places like clinics and offices. Susan used clear sentences like, "Please wait in the seating area," and "The room is the first door on the right." These sentences are easy to use when you need to help someone or give directions. Now I will tell you a story about a man named Jack. Jack works at a car rental company. He helps people who need to rent a car for travel or work. One morning, a woman named Linda came in. She said, "Good morning, I need to rent a car for 3 days." Jack said, "Good morning. Do you have a driver's license with you?" Linda said, "Yes, here it is." Jack looked at her license and said, "Thank you. What kind of car would you like?" Linda said, "Something small. I will only drive around the city." Jack said, "We have a small car available. It is good for city driving and easy to park." Linda said, "That sounds good. How much is it per day?" Jack said, "It is $30 per day. That includes insurance." Linda said, "Okay, I will take it." Jack gave her a form and said, "Please fill this out and sign at the bottom." Linda filled the form and gave it back. Jack handed her the keys and said, "Here are the keys. The car is in space number 6 outside." Linda said, "Thank you. I will bring it back in 3 days." Jack said, "Drive safely and have a nice trip." This is another good example of polite and clear conversation. Jack used simple phrases like, "Do you have a license?" and "Please fill this out." These kinds of sentences help people work together easily. Let me now tell you about a woman named Rachel. Rachel is a teacher at a primary school. She teaches children how to read, write, and count. Every morning, she greets her students with a smile. One morning, a boy named Tommy looked sad. Rachel went to him and said, "Good morning, Tommy. Are you okay?" Let me now tell you about a woman named Rachel. Rachel is a teacher at a primary school. She teaches children how to read, write, and count. Every morning, she greets her students with a smile. One morning, a boy named Tommy looked sad. Rachel went to him and said, "Good morning, Tommy. Are you okay?" Tommy said, "No, I forgot my homework." Rachel said, "Thank you for telling me. Do not worry. You can bring it tomorrow." Tommy said, "I am sorry. I will not forget next time." Rachel said, "That is okay. We all forget things sometimes. Let us focus on today's lesson." Tommy smiled a little and said, "Okay." Rachel then said, "We will start with reading. Please open your book to page 12. The class opened their books, and Rachel began reading with them. This story shows how to speak kindly to children and how to teach with care. Rachel used soft and helpful words like, "That is okay," and "Let us focus on today's lesson." These phrases help children feel safe and ready to learn. Now I will tell you about a man named Frank. Frank is a gardener. He works in a big park where he plants flowers, trims trees, and waters the grass. One day, a boy named David came to the park with his grandmother. David saw Frank planting flowers and asked, "What are you doing?" Frank smiled and said, "I am planting new flowers. They will grow and look very pretty in a few weeks." David said, "Can I help?" Frank said, "Yes, you can help me put some seeds in the soil." David took a few seeds and placed them in the hole. Frank said, "Well done. Now we will cover them with soil and water them." David said, "This is fun." Frank said, "Yes, plants grow when we take care of them." David's grandmother said, "Thank you for showing him." Frank said, "You are welcome. Come back in a few weeks to see the flowers." This story shows how to talk to someone kindly and teach something new. Frank used simple words like, "Put some seeds in the soil," and "cover them with soil." These are good examples of giving clear steps. Let me tell you about a man named Michael. Michael is a delivery driver. Every day he delivers packages to many houses in the city. One morning, Michael had a problem with his truck. It would not start. He called his boss and said, "My truck will not start. What should I do?" His boss said, "Try to check the battery. If it does not work, call the garage." Michael opened the truck's hood and looked at the battery. He saw that the battery was old and needed to be changed. He called the garage and asked for help. The garage said, "We will send a mechanic to fix your truck in 1 hour." Michael waited for the mechanic. After 1 hour, the mechanic came and fixed the battery. Michael said, "Thank you very much." The mechanic said, "You are welcome. Drive carefully." Michael then started his deliveries again. He said, "I am happy my truck is working now." This story shows how to talk clearly on the phone and explain a problem. You can use words like, "My truck will not start," and "What should I do?" when you need help with something. These phrases are easy to remember. Now I will tell you a story about a woman named Emma. Emma works as a librarian. She helps people find books and keeps the library quiet and clean. One afternoon, a man named Peter came to the library. He said, "Hello, I am looking for a book about history." Emma smiled and said, "Hello, Peter. We have many history books. What time period are you interested in?" Peter said, "I want to learn about the 20th century. Emma walked with Peter to the history section. She showed him several books and said, "This book is good for beginners. It talks about important events from 1900 to 1950. Peter looked at the book and said, "I will take this one. Thank you for your help." Emma said, "You are welcome. If you need more books, just ask me." This story shows polite ways to help someone. Emma asked questions and listened carefully to understand what Peter needed. This is an important skill when you talk to others. Now I want to tell you about a man named James. James is a chef at a small restaurant. Every morning, he prepares food for customers. One day, a woman named Sarah came to the restaurant. She said, "Good morning, I have a food allergy. I cannot eat peanuts." James said, "Good morning, Sarah. Thank you for telling me. I will make sure your food does not have peanuts." Sarah said, "That is very kind. I am allergic, so I must be careful." James cooked her meal with no peanuts and served it with a smile. Sarah said, "Thank you. The food is delicious." James said, "I am happy you like it." This story teaches you how to talk about important information. James listened carefully and gave good service. You can say, "Thank you for telling me," when someone gives you important details. It shows respect. Next, I want to tell you about a woman named Linda. Linda works at a bank. She helps customers open accounts and answer questions about their money. One day, a man named Robert came to the bank. He said, "Hello, I want to open a savings account." Linda said, "Hello, Robert, I can help you with that. Please fill out this form." Robert filled out the form and gave it back. Linda said, "Thank you. Your account is now open. You can deposit money anytime." Robert said, "Thank you very much." Linda said, "You are welcome. If you have any questions, please call us." This story shows a polite and clear conversation at a bank. Linda used simple phrases like, "Please fill out this form," and "If you have any questions, please call us." These sentences help make the talk easy to understand. Let me tell you about a man named Tom. Tom is a teacher at a high school. He teaches math. One day, a student named Alice asked him, "Mr. Tom, can you help me with my homework?" Tom said, "Of course, Alice. What question do you need help with?" Alice said, "I do not understand this problem about fractions." Tom said, "Let me explain. Fractions are parts of a whole. For example, 1/2 means one part of two equal parts." Alice listened carefully and said, "Thank you, Mr. Tom. I understand now." Tom said, "You are welcome. Keep practicing." This story shows how to ask and give help politely. Tom used simple explanations to make the lesson easy to understand. You can say, "Can you help me?" and "Let me explain" in similar situations. Now I will tell you about a woman named Karen. Karen works in a post office. She helps people send letters and packages. One morning, a man named David came to the post office. He said, "Good morning. I want to send this package to my brother." Karen said, "Good morning, David. Please fill out this form with the address." David filled out the form and gave it back. Karen said, "Thank you. The cost to send this package is $10. David gave the money and said, "Here you go." Karen said, "Thank you. Your package will arrive in 3 days." David said, "Thank you very much." Karen said, "You are welcome." This story shows a polite and simple conversation at the post office. Karen used clear words to explain the process. You can use these phrases when you go to a post office. Next, I will tell you about a man named Paul. Paul works as a waiter at a restaurant. One evening, a woman named Anna came to the restaurant. Paul said, "Good evening. Here is the menu." Anna looked at the menu and said, "I want to order the chicken and rice." Paul said, "Would you like anything to drink?" Anna said, "Yes, A glass of water, please. Paul wrote the order and said, "Thank you. Your food will be ready soon." After some time, Paul brought the food and said, "Here is your chicken and rice." Anna said, "Thank you. It looks delicious." Paul said, "Enjoy your meal." This story shows how to order food politely and clearly. Paul used simple sentences like, "Would you like anything to drink?" and "Your food will be ready soon." These phrases help make the conversation easy and friendly. Let me now tell you about a woman named Emma. Emma is a nurse. She works in a hospital and helps patients feel better. One day, a man named Mark came to the hospital. He said, "I have a pain in my arm." Emma said, "I am sorry to hear that. Let me check your arm." Emma looked at his arm carefully. She said, "You have a small cut. I will clean it and put a bandage on it." Mark said, "Thank you. It does not hurt much." Emma said, "That is good. Please keep the bandage clean." Mark said, "I will. Thank you very much." Emma said, "You are welcome. If the pain gets worse, please come back." This story shows how to talk kindly and give simple medical help. Emma used easy words like, "Let me check your arm," and "Please keep the bandage clean." You can use these sentences if you ever help someone who is hurt. Now, I want to tell you about a man named Henry. Henry is a taxi driver. One evening, a woman named Julia called a taxi. She said, "Hello, I need a ride to the train station." Henry said, "Hello, Julia. I will be there in 5 minutes." When Henry arrived, Julia got into the taxi. Henry said, "Where would you like to go?" Julia said, "To the train station, please." Henry drove carefully and said, "The trip will take about 15 minutes. Julia said, "Thank you for the information." When they arrived, Henry said, "Here is the train station. The cost is $20. Julia gave the money and said, "Thank you for the ride." Henry said, "You are welcome. Have a good trip." This story shows polite and clear talk in a taxi. Now I want to tell you about a man named Henry. Henry is a taxi driver. One evening, a woman named Julia called a taxi. She said, "Hello, I need a ride to the train station." Henry said, "Hello, Julia. I will be there in 5 minutes." When Henry arrived, Julia got into the taxi. Henry said, "Where would you like to go?" Julia said, "To the train station, please." Henry drove carefully and said, "The trip will take about 15 minutes. Julia said, "Thank you for the information." When they arrived, Henry said, "Here is the train station. The cost is $20. Julia gave the money and said, "Thank you for the ride." Henry said, "You are welcome. Have a good trip." This story shows polite and clear talk in a taxi. Henry used sentences like, "Where would you like to go?" and "The cost is $20. These are useful phrases if you take a taxi. I will now share more stories like these so you can hear how English is used in everyday life. Keep listening carefully. Each story helps you learn new words and how to put them together in simple sentences. This will make your speaking and writing better over time. Keep practicing with me. Thank you for continuing with me. Now I will share many more stories and examples. Each one will help you understand English better and practice your listening and writing skills. These stories use simple words and sentences. They talk about everyday life, so you can learn English that is useful for you. Let me tell you about a man named David. David works as a gardener. Every morning, he goes to a park to take care of the plants and trees. One day, David saw that some flowers were not healthy. He checked the soil and found it was very dry. David said, "The plants need water." He used a big hose to water all the flowers and trees. After watering, David looked happy. He said, "Now the plants will grow well." This story shows how to talk about problems and solutions. You can say the plants need water to explain what is wrong. You can also say, "I will fix it," when you want to help. Now, I want to tell you about a woman named Susan. Susan works in a small cafe. She serves coffee and food to customers. One afternoon, a man named John came to the cafe. He said, "Hello, I would like a cup of tea and a sandwich." Susan said, "Hello, John. What kind of sandwich do you want?" John said, "I want a chicken sandwich, please." Susan prepared the tea and sandwich and gave it to John. John said, "Thank you. How much is it?" Susan said, "It is $5. John gave the money and said, "Here you go." Susan said, "Thank you. Have a nice day." John said, "You too." This story shows how to order food and pay politely. You can say, "I would like," when you order something. You can ask, "How much is it?" to know the price. Next, I will tell you about a man named Peter. Peter is a postman. Every day, he delivers letters and packages to people's houses. One morning, Peter found a letter that was very important. It was for a lady named Mary. Peter said, "I must deliver this letter carefully." When he arrived at Mary's house, he knocked on the door. Mary opened the door and said, "Hello, Peter. Thank you for delivering my letter." Peter said, "You are welcome, Mary. Have a good day." This story shows how to talk politely when you give something to someone. You can say thank you for delivering to show your appreciation. You can also say you are welcome when someone thanks you. Now I want to tell you about a woman named Lisa. Lisa works at a supermarket. She helps customers find the things they need. One day a man named Mark came to the supermarket. He said, "Hello, Lisa. Where can I find bread?" Lisa said, "Hello, Mark. The bread is in aisle 5. Mark said, "Thank you. Also, where is the milk?" Lisa said, "The milk is next to the bread." Mark said, "Great. Thank you very much." Lisa said, "You are welcome." This story shows how to ask for and give directions. You can say, "Where can I find," when you need help. You can say, "It is in," to tell the place. Let me tell you about a man named Kevin. Kevin is a bus driver. Every day he drives many passengers to different places. One evening, a woman named Anna got on the bus. Kevin said, "Hello, Anna. Where are you going today?" Anna said, "I am going to the library." Kevin said, "The library is the 3rd stop on this bus." Anna said, "Thank you, Kevin." Kevin said, "You are welcome." This story shows how to talk on the bus. You can ask, "Where are you going?" to start a conversation. You can also give information about stops and places. Now I want to share a story about a woman named Rachel. Rachel is a teacher. She teaches young children how to read and write. One day, a boy named Sam came to her class. He said, "I find reading hard." Rachel said, That is okay, Sam. We will practice. Together. She gave Sam a book with easy words. Sam read the words slowly. Rachel said, "Good job, Sam. Keep practicing every day." Sam smiled and said, "Thank you, Rachel." This story shows how to encourage someone. You can say, "That is okay," to make people feel better. You can also say, "Keep practicing," to help someone improve. Now I want to tell you about a man named John. John works in a hotel. He helps guests check in and check out. One afternoon, a family arrived at the hotel. John said, "Welcome to our hotel. Do you have a reservation?" The father said, "Yes, we have a reservation for 2 rooms." John checked the computer and said, "Your rooms are ready. Here are the keys." The mother said, "Thank you, John." John said, "You are welcome. Enjoy your stay." This story shows how to talk to guests politely. You can say, "Do you have a reservation?" to ask for information. You can say, "Enjoy your stay," to be friendly. Let me tell you about a woman named Emily. Emily works as a nurse in a clinic. One day, a man named Paul came to the clinic. He said, "I have a headache and a fever." Emily said, "I am sorry to hear that. Please sit here. I will take your temperature." Emily checked Paul's temperature with a thermometer. She said, "Your temperature is high. You need to rest and drink water." Paul said, "Thank you for your help, Emily." Emily said, "You are welcome. If you feel worse, come back to the clinic." This story shows how to talk kindly when helping someone who is sick. You can say, "Please sit here," to give instructions. You can say, "If you feel worse, come back," to give advice. Now I want to tell you about a man named James. James is a mechanic. He fixes cars in a garage. One day, a woman named Laura came with a broken car. James said, "What is wrong with your car?" Laura said, "The engine is making a strange noise." James looked at the engine and said, "I will check it and tell you what to do." After checking, James said, "You need to change the oil and fix a small part." Laura said, "How much will it cost?" James said, "It will be $100. Laura said, "Thank you for the information." James said, "You are welcome." This story shows how to talk about problems and prices. You can say, "What is wrong?" to ask about a problem. You can say, "How much will it cost?" to ask about money. Now I want to share a story about a woman named Sarah. Sarah is a librarian. One afternoon, a man named Mike came to the library. Mike said, "Hello, Sarah. I want to return this book." Sarah said, "Hello, Mike. Thank you for returning the book on time." Mike said, "You are welcome." Sarah said, "If you want another book, just ask me." Mike said, "Thank you, Sarah." This story shows polite words when returning things. You can say, "Thank you for returning," to show appreciation. You can say, "If you want, just ask," to offer help. These stories show you many ways to talk politely and clearly in daily life. Listening to them helps you understand how people speak in different situations. It also helps you learn new words and simple sentences. When you listen carefully, you will find it easier to speak and write in English. Keep practicing with these stories. Keep listening and repeating the sentences. It will help you become better every day. Thank you for staying with me. Now I will tell many more simple stories. Each story uses easy English words. They help you listen carefully and understand English better. These stories are about everyday life. They show how people talk in common situations. You can learn useful words and phrases from them. Let me tell you about a man named Michael. Michael is a delivery driver. Every day, he drives a van to deliver packages to people's houses. One morning, Michael woke up early. He checked his list of deliveries. He said, "I have 10 packages to deliver today." Michael started his van and drove to the first house. He knocked on the door. A woman named Anna opened the door. Michael said, "Good morning, I have a package for you." Anna smiled and said, "Thank you, Michael." Michael handed her the package. Then he said, "Have a nice day." Anna said, "You too." This story shows how to talk politely when you give something to someone. You can say good morning to greet someone. You can say thank you to show politeness. Now I want to tell you about a woman named Emma. Emma works in a bookstore. She helps customers find books. One afternoon, a man named Paul came to the store. He said, "Hello, Emma. Can you help me find a book about cooking?" Emma said, "Hello, Paul. Yes, the cooking books are in the second aisle." Paul said, "Thank you. Can you recommend a good book for beginners?" Emma smiled and said, "Yes, I recommend Easy Cooking for Everyone." Paul said, "Great, I will buy that book." Emma said, "If you need help, just ask me." This story shows how to ask for help and give advice. You can say, "Can you help me?" when you need assistance. You can say, "I recommend" to give a suggestion. Let me tell you about a man named Robert. Robert is a taxi driver. One evening, he was waiting at the taxi stand. A woman named Linda got into his taxi. Robert said, "Good evening, where would you like to go?" Linda said, "Good evening. Please take me to the city center." Robert started the taxi and drove carefully. On the way, Linda said, "Thank you for driving safely." Robert smiled and said, "You are welcome. It is my job." When they arrived, Linda said, "Here is the fare." Robert said, "Thank you. Have a good night." Linda said, "You too." This story shows how to talk when traveling by taxi. You can say, "Where would you like to go?" to ask about the destination. You can say, "Thank you" when you pay money. Now, I want to tell you about a woman named Karen. Karen is a nurse in a hospital. One day, a man named David came to the hospital. He said, "I have a pain in my leg." Karen said, "Please sit down, David. I will check your leg." Karen looked carefully and said, "Your leg is swollen. You need rest." David said, "Thank you for your help." Karen said, "You are welcome. If you have more pain, come back." This story shows how to talk kindly when helping someone who is sick. You can say, "Please sit down" to give instructions. You can say, "If you have more pain, come back" to give advice. Let me tell you about a man named James. James works in a post office. One morning, a woman named Lucy came to send a letter. James said, "Good morning, Lucy. How can I help you?" Lucy said, "Good morning, James. I want to send this letter to my sister." James said, "Please write the address clearly." Lucy wrote the address. James said, "Thank you. The letter will arrive in 3 days." Lucy said, "Thank you very much." James said, You are welcome. This story shows how to send mail and talk politely. You can say, "How can I help you?" to offer help. You can say thank you to be polite. Now, I want to tell you about a woman named Olivia. Olivia works in a coffee shop. One afternoon, a man named Mark came to order a drink. Mark said, "Hello, Olivia. I want a cup of coffee with milk." Olivia said, "Hello, Mark. Would you like sugar with your coffee?" Mark said, "Yes, please." Olivia made the coffee and gave it to Mark. Mark said, "Thank you. How much is it?" Olivia said, "It is $3. Mark gave the money and said, "Here you go." Olivia said, "Thank you. Have a good day." Mark said, "You too." This story shows how to order food and drinks politely. You can say, "Would you like to offer something?" You can say, "Here you go," when giving money. Let me tell you about a man named Peter. Peter is a teacher. He teaches English to adults. One day, a new student named Anna joined his class. Peter said, "Welcome, Anna. What is your name?" Anna said, "My name is Anna." Peter said, "Nice to meet you, Anna. Where are you from?" Anna said, "I am from Canada." Peter said, "Great. We will learn English together." Anna smiled and said, "Thank you, Peter." This story shows how to introduce yourself and meet new people. You can say, "What is your name?" to ask a name. You can say, "Nice to meet you," to be polite. Now, I want to tell you about a woman named Rachel. Rachel works at a supermarket. She helps customers find things. One day, a man named John came to buy vegetables. John said, "Hello, Rachel. Where is the fruit section?" Rachel said, "Hello, John. The fruit section is near the back." John said, "Thank you. Also, where can I find bread?" Rachel said, "Bread is next to the fruit section." John said, "Great. Thank you very much." Rachel said, "You are welcome." This story shows how to ask for and give directions. You can say, "Where is?" to ask for a place. You can say, "It is near," to give directions. Let me tell you about a man named Kevin. Kevin works as a mechanic. One day, a woman named Susan brought her car to Kevin. Susan said, "Kevin, my car is not starting." Kevin said, "I will check the engine." Kevin looked at the engine and said, "The battery is dead. You need a new battery." Susan said, "How much does it cost?" Kevin said, "It costs $100. Susan said, "Thank you for the information." Kevin said, "You are welcome." This story shows how to talk about problems and prices. You can say, "What is wrong?" to ask about a problem. You can say, "How much does it cost?" to ask about money. Now I want to tell you about a woman named Emily. Emily is a librarian. One afternoon, a man named Mike came to the library. Mike said, "Hello, Emily. I want to return this book." Emily said, "Hello, Mike. Thank you for returning the book on time." Mike said, "You are welcome." Emily said, "If you want another book, just ask me." Mike said, "Thank you, Emily." This story shows polite words when returning things. You can say thank you for returning to show appreciation. You can say if you want, just ask to offer help. These stories show many ways people talk in daily life. Listening to them helps you learn English faster. When you hear the sentences many times, your brain remembers them. This makes speaking and writing easier for you. You can use these words and phrases when you meet people or do everyday activities. Practice listening and writing the sentences. This will help you get better every day. Keep listening and learning with us. Thank you for listening carefully. Now I will share many more stories. These stories are easy to understand. They will help you practice your English listening and writing skills. The stories are about normal things people do every day. I will use simple words and clear sentences. This way, you can follow the conversation without any problem. You will hear how people talk in real life. This helps you get ready for real English speaking and writing. Let me tell you about a man named John. John works in a bakery. Every morning, he wakes up early to bake bread and cakes. One day, John baked a big chocolate cake. He said, "I want to make the cake perfect for my customers." When the bakery opened, many people came to buy bread and cakes. A woman named Lisa came and said, "Hello, John. Your cake looks delicious." John smiled and said, "Thank you, Lisa. Would you like to try a piece?" Lisa said, "Yes, please." John gave her a slice of cake. Lisa said, "This is very tasty." John said, "I am happy you like it." This story shows how to talk about work and offer something politely. Now I want to tell you about a woman named Sarah. Sarah works at a flower shop. One day, a man named Tom came to buy flowers. Tom said, "Hello, Sarah. I want to buy some red roses." Sarah said, "Hello, Tom. How many roses do you want?" Tom said, "I want a dozen roses." Sarah picked 12 red roses and said, "These are fresh roses. They will last a long time." Tom said, "Thank you, Sarah. How much do I pay?" Sarah said, "It costs $20. Tom gave the money and said, "Here you go." Sarah said, "Thank you. Have a nice day." Tom said, "You too." This story shows how to buy things and talk about prices. Let me tell you about a man named David. David is a bus driver. Every day he drives the bus to many places in the city. One morning, a woman named Anna got on the bus. David said, "Good morning. Where do you want to go?" Anna said, "Good morning. Please take me to the train station." David said, "Okay, Anna. The bus will be there in 20 minutes. On the way, David said, "The bus stops next at the library." Anna said, "Thank you, David." When Anna got off, David said, "Have a good day." Anna said, "Thank you." This story shows how to talk when using public transport. Now, I want to tell you about a woman named Emma. Emma is a librarian. She helps people find books. One afternoon, a boy named Sam came to the library. Sam said, "Hello, Emma. I want to find a book about animals." Emma said, "Hello, Sam. The books about animals are on the 3rd floor." Sam said, "Thank you. Can you help me find a book about lions?" Emma said, "Yes, I will help you." Emma showed Sam the book about lions. Sam said, "This is great. Thank you, Emma." Emma said, "You are welcome. Enjoy reading." This story shows how to ask for help in a library. Let me tell you about a man named Paul. Paul works in a bank. One day, a woman named Rachel came to the bank. Rachel said, "Hello, Paul. I want to open a new bank account." Paul said, "Hello, Rachel. Please fill this form." Rachel filled the form and said, "What documents do I need?" Paul said, "You need your ID and a proof of address." Rachel gave the documents. Paul said, "Thank you. Your account is now open." Rachel said, "Thank you very much." This story shows how to talk about banking. Now I want to tell you about a woman named Laura. Laura works in a grocery store. One morning, a man named Steve came to buy vegetables. Steve said, "Hello, Laura. Where are the tomatoes?" Laura said, "Hello, Steve. Tomatoes are in aisle 5. Steve said, "Thank you. Also, where can I find onions?" Laura said, "Onions are next to the tomatoes." Steve said, "Great. I will buy some onions and tomatoes." Laura said, "If you need anything else, just ask." Steve said, "Thank you." This story shows how to ask for places in a store. Let me tell you about a man named Mark. Mark is a mechanic. One day, a woman named Helen came to his workshop. Helen said, "Mark, my car makes a strange noise." Mark said, "I will check the car." Mark looked at the engine and said, "You need to change the oil." Helen said, "How much will it cost?" Mark said, "It will cost $50. Helen said, "Thank you for your help." Mark said, "You are welcome." This story shows how to talk about car problems and money. Now, I want to tell you about a woman named Betty. Betty is a teacher. She teaches children English. One day, a boy named James asked her, "Betty, how can I learn English faster?" Betty said, "Practice every day, James. Listen to stories and speak with friends." James said, "Thank you, Betty. I will practice every day." Betty smiled and said, "That is good. Keep going." This story shows how to give advice to learners. Let me tell you about a man named Eric. Eric works in a restaurant. One evening, a woman named Mary came to eat. Eric said, "Good evening, Mary. Would you like to see the menu?" Mary said, "Yes, please." Eric said, "We have chicken, fish, and vegetarian dishes." Mary said, "I want chicken, please." Eric said, "Would you like a drink with your meal?" Mary said, "Yes, water, please." Eric brought the food and drink. Mary said, "Thank you, Eric." Eric said, "Enjoy your meal." This story shows how to order food politely. These stories give many examples of everyday conversations. When you listen carefully, you hear how people speak politely and clearly. You learn new words and phrases. You can practice writing these. Sentences too. Writing helps you remember the language better. When you listen and write, your English will improve step by step. Keep practicing with us. We will tell many more stories to help you. This way, learning English will become easier and more fun for you.